My father had an interesting background. He was a working class boy from South Wales, left school at 14 and became a shipwright apprentice. But he was a clever man and soon rose up through the ranks and became professionally qualified as a naval constructor, and went on to manage dockyards around the world. So he'd become thoroughly middle class by the time I came along. But he came from a very humble background. And I think, had he come from a different background, the law might have been something that attracted him. I was always a shy girl, and I didn't really think that the bar could possibly be for me. But I was fascinated by the law, so I became an academic. And I lectured for 7 or 8 years before it occurred to me that I was never going to be a true academic. And I discovered the Chancery Bar. I really did not know, I think, coming out of university, that my little bit of the Chancery Bar existed. And when I did discover it through some friends of mine who put me in touch with a mutual friend who took me on as a pupil during a long vacation from teaching, I discovered a blissful situation in which one was faced with a series of exam questions, but involving real people, and for which people would actually pay you money. And I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. I thought I didn't know that that existed at all. I had my first child comparatively late, at 35, when I'd only been in practice for 3 years because of my delayed start in practice. So I was barely established, really. But I took a very short period of time off and came back. My practice improved after I came back. I had my second child rapidly thereafter. Again, I came back very quickly, and again my practice continued to improve thereafter. So having the children did not prove to be an obstacle in terms of practice development at all. But the nature of my practice helped too, because I was doing a lot of advisory work in those days, comparatively little litigation, as subsequently became the case. And so it was easy to work a comparatively short office day. One of the great advantages of the bar being its flexibility and the ability to work from home. Even then, that was before working from home became as conventional as it is today, but it was entirely possible to organise one's life around the children and work. I had a torrid time in the early 90s when my husband left, when the children were 8 and 6. That was a very difficult period of time. But it had 2 beneficial results, in fact. The first beneficial result was that I knew then that I really had to take my practice seriously, because if we were going to live as we wanted to live, as I wanted the children to be able to live, I was going to have to be, to a very large extent, the breadwinner. And so I really buckled down, and that's really when the ambition to take silk took hold. I thought, that's what I really want to do. There were, I think, probably 3 other female members of the Chancery Bar at the time I joined, not really doing the kind of specialised work that I was doing. I was only ever interested in trusts. That's my sole obsession professionally. And so there wasn't anybody doing that kind of work. But I enjoyed, it's difficult to say this really, I enjoyed being unusual at the bar, because if, for example, the first time you met, you appeared in front of a particular judge, and you were not simply another white Oxbridge Old Etonian male, and you did a decent job, you were noticed, and that in fact assisted, I think, the progress of my career quite a bit. Because you stood out from the crowd, and if you were good, that was noted and taken account of. I mentioned that there were 2 happy results actually from the unfortunate events surrounding my divorce. The second happy event was that one of my colleagues in Chambers, who had been a friend throughout our practices, turned out to be something more than that, and we've lived together for the last 20 odd years. He and I have very similar practices, and we had got to the stage where the children were grown. Our practices were almost exclusively international, and we decided that there was little point in sitting in London conducting them from Lincoln's Inn when we could find somewhere else to be what we rather grandly call our global hub. That's the base from which we branch out and travel around the world litigating and advising in our area. So we took the plunge, and we were very lucky to be able to obtain work permits in Cayman. We were the only 2 barristers allowed to have work permits in Cayman, and we set up our own chambers. So I now practice both from London and from the Cayman Islands. My career has spanned half the 100 years that this project is celebrating. So I've seen an awful lot of changes in my time, and it's difficult for me, I think, from my perspective, to look to the circumstances of an entrant now, because times have changed so much. People work so much harder, or at least longer hours. That makes work-life balance so much more difficult, I think, than it was in my generation. That wasn't the expectation, that you would work all hours of the day and night in the way that it seems to be these days. I think that makes it much more challenging. Now, how you engage is a matter of individual choice. What I would hate to see is a generation of women who come out of a particular mould, having seen that mould in practice in the male sphere when I came into practice. You know, it was universally white, it was universally Oxbridge, effectively. One wouldn't want to see women turning into the same kind of model, I think. Be yourself, really, is the message.